Okay. So we are there as well.
הלו, טליה? שלום? את מדברת עברית?
קצת קטן.
קצת. תודה רבה. מה, השם שלי זה רותי, ואני מישראל.
Amazing.
And so we'll give it just another minute or two for folks to populate the call. And obviously, people are still coming in. It's not even 7 yet, and as you know, there
between us and the Almighty. Hello, Pauline.
Hi, Ruthie. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. From your mouth to whatever. Hopefully, yeah. We have a lot of work to do.
This is true. Very true.
I'll just see you here tomorrow night. The readout of Joy Reid starts now.
So folks who are coming in, we're going to give it just another moment or two to populate before we begin, but we'll be beginning very shortly. And actually, let me do it now. I'm going to seek to mute everyone, although Talia and Pauline, I'll ask you kindly to unmute now. But so that way we'll have perfect. So I'm sure others will be joining us as we go forward. But to be relatively prompt, we're going to begin. Pauline?
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Hi, Talia. It's a pleasure to meet you and have you here with us tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I'm Pauline Zimmerman of the Jewish Federation of Western Connecticut. We welcome this opportunity to participate with B'nai Israel of Southbury and Temple Shalom of Milford as co-sponsor of tonight's conversation with Talia Khan. Talia is an MIT graduate student and president of the MIT Israel Alliance. The subject tonight is most timely, and given the national debate to which she herself is a participant, we so look forward to Talia's insights and recommendations. Thank you all so much for joining us. Rabbi Polakov?
Thank you. Now, about a month ago, I was watching a report about the now infamous testimony before Congress by the presidents of Harvard and MIT and Penn. At a press conference, counterpoint was offered by an MIT student who looked familiar to me. My niece Julie's husband, Jason, is a jazz musician, and he's teaching at MIT. And at Julie's final performance of the Broadway show Funny Girl, he introduced my wife, Ellen, and me to one of his students and her sister. So I texted Jason, I just saw on the news hour someone who looked like the student I met at Funny Girl. She was very persuasive. Is this your student? Jason responded with a text, yes, exclamation point. More texts. Soon I reintroduced myself to Talia as Rabbi Eric, AKA Uncle Eric, and tonight's conversation began to take shape. So thank you, Jason, who is at a conference and will watch later. And thank you, Talia. I wrote to you in my invitation. Your experience sadly cuts through the fog and equivocations and is precisely the subject that the Jewish community must process and address. Apparently, the New York Times agrees, as you were quoted in its December 13th story regarding MIT President Dr. Sally Kornbluth. Joining us tonight are congregants from B'nai Israel and members of our Israel Advocacy Committee and our Kulanu Task Force Initiative to Fight Anti-Semitism, Rabbi Mark Cohen and congregants from Temple Sholem, Jewish community members locally, Pauline Zimmerman from the Federation Board, and some who are active in the New England region of the Jewish National Fund. There's also a few of Jason and Julie's groupies and a number of non-Jewish friends and allies, including leading officials and opinion makers in our area region who are here now or who will watch us later on YouTube. Talia and I will first speak, and then there will be an opportunity for Q&A. Dan Goodman, Dr. Dan, the chair of our Israel Advocacy Committee, will call questions that are typed into the chat, and he will send them to me to pose. So this will be a busy and important hour. So let us proceed. As we begin, Talia, our first question, I wanted to get your sense regarding anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism on college campuses, and in particular, for your experience at MIT, one of the leading universities in our nation and the world. What was it like there at MIT vis-a-vis anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism before October 7th?
Sure. Well, first, thank you, Rabbi Uncle Eric, for inviting me to talk. I am also, by the way, one of the Jason Julie groupies for sure. Yeah, again, it's such a pleasure to be talking with everybody here and everybody who's gonna be watching later. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to even listen to me. I hope I have something useful to say to you. To answer your question, so I am a second-year graduate student at MIT, but I did undergrad at MIT as well, and I started in 2016. So I took some time off. I was in Brazil studying natural fibers and things in between, but this is effectively my 8th year at MIT. And so I've been here a long time, and in reflecting back, the reason that I joined, the reason that I wanted to come to MIT was because when I came to visit, the culture was just so vibrant and quirky and inquisitive and interdisciplinary, and everybody was so open-minded. So even if you know, you're at the campus preview weekend that we all went to when we were 18 and deciding whether or not we wanted to come here, there were, you know, silly events like pancake making or whatever, and you would go there and you would talk to somebody who's doing astrophysics, and then you turn to your left and you talk to somebody who just created their own coding language, and somebody else who's, you know, studying brain tumors in mice, and everybody was, you know, open-minded and inquisitive, and that was one of the things, that was the thing that made me choose MIT, was the culture of, you know, quirkiness and open-mindedness. And I really felt that, and to an extent I still do feel that amongst the students at MIT. But prior to October 7th, I really felt that while I understood that in the world there are anti-Semites and there are people who think that Israel doesn't have a right to exist, and I, you know, only experienced one time during undergrad, an Israeli friend of mine told me that they were, you know, harassed at by some drunk person at a party, called a baby killer because they served in the IDF. And that was shocking to me. But I really believe that that was a one-off, and that there was one bad apple, but that the culture of MIT was not okay with that. That kind of speaking to another student in that way was unacceptable. So yeah, I think prior to October 7th, I don't think I really understood the extent to which people held these beliefs. Yeah, is how I would interpret my experience, at least at MIT on campus.
Right. And you know, I think prior to throughout the whole Jewish world, prior to October 7th was so shocking in so many ways, that we had our suspicions, but it was oftentimes hard to nail down those concrete examples, or fully nail down all of the concrete examples. So if that's what was like before October 7th, what was it like, and what has it been like at MIT in the days subsequent to October 7th?
Yeah, so MIT's gone. I mean, like, it's like my whole perception of MIT and of, you know, the people here has totally shifted. I was very, very shocked to see immediately after October 7th, people supporting Hamas, saying that, you know, resistance is justified when people are occupied. So justifying the complete atrocities of October 7th. And the worst part was nobody was saying that's not okay. The administration wasn't saying that's not okay. Other students weren't really saying that's not okay. I think people were too afraid. And what I saw over the next few weeks was this normalization of anti-Semitism, this normalization of saying that the people, you know, that from the river to the sea, Palestine should be freed, the Jews should go back to where they came from, and Israel has no right to exist. And the silence of a lot of people was very shocking. And certainly there have been so many amazing friends of mine, and I'm sure everybody has heard this a million times and said this a million times, but this is like a moment when you really understand who your friends are, and like, who are the people where if it were, you know, 1938, who would hide you in their basement, who would hide you in their attic. Unfortunately, that's like a thing that we've all had to think about. And certainly there have been some amazing friends of mine who have been so supportive, and that has given me so much hope. But it's been really disheartening to see not only students, but faculty, staff, and of course the administration just be so silent, and especially the administration just trying to gaslight us into thinking that, you know, everything's totally fine, like you're being dramatic, it, you know, everything's fine and dandy, let's just go back to the status quo and not deal with this. That has been the most shocking for me. And of course, like aside from all of that, you have the substance of what's happening. So you have all of these protests, and because MIT is an open campus, which used to be an awesome thing, you know, it used to mean that any one of you people on the call right now could come to campus and look at the classrooms and see, you know, and so many of the labs, including mine, we have a window display of, you know, like 3D prints and like cool materials we've made, and race cars and robots and cool stuff like that. And we love it when tourists come, and we think it's cool. But unfortunately, because it's an open campus and the anti-Israel organization has been inviting outside protesters who have been, you know, violent in protests in Cambridge and Boston, there have been arrests. They're actively inviting these violent people onto our campus, and now we're scared. You know, I would hate to believe that another student would hurt another student. But when they're inviting these people onto campus, I do legitimately get scared. And a lot of people do legitimately get scared. And, you know, many people have put up security cameras. And the problem, too, is that because the MIT administration hasn't been enforcing their own rules on all people equally, and because they're afraid, you know, President Kornbluth, I've spoken to her numerous times, and she told me she's afraid to enforce all MIT policies equally on all groups and individuals because she's afraid of faculty backlash, because she's a new president and she needs faculty support to get things done as the president of MIT. So she's afraid because she's been getting pressure from faculty saying, like, no, don't discipline these students who are like blatantly, flagrantly violating all of these MIT policies, and really creating an environment that is totally hostile to many students learning. And it's not just Jewish students who have had their learning disrupted, it's all students. You know, there was one protest where the anti-Israel club blocked the main entrance to MIT, and they invited so many people, and it got so big and potentially violent that the MIT police had to shut, like, they cordoned off this main corridor. That's usually how I get to my office. That's how many people get to their offices and classes and things. And just to see that they had like taken over for over 12 hours, I think was really shocking for every student. Just to hear these people yelling, and like, it was scary. It was shocking. Yeah, and the fact that MIT doesn't discipline these people just emboldens them to just, you know, they think like every time they move the edge further and further of what's like socially acceptable on campus to say and to do, and every time they're just, you know, tiptoeing further and further and further. They're just pushing the edge a little more, and there has to be a stop to that. Like, they can't just keep going. You know, in the congressional testimony, I don't know how many people watched it, but the Penn president said something. I was actually sitting in the room when this question happened, and the Penn president said that calling for the genocide of Jews is only considered a harassment if it turns into conduct. And I thought to myself, what? They have to build the gas chambers before it's considered harassment? It has to be actual physical violence. It has to be actually physical something, conduct. Like, are you kidding me? That's obscene. Like, I think everybody has just been so shocked at what this normalization of anti-Semitism, this fear so many people seem to have around just like saying what is wrong and what is right, and like terrorism is wrong, killing people, raping people, like all of these things are just wrong, period, full stop. For some reason, that's hard for people to say, and that's really scary. So sorry, that was a very long answer. I know you have more questions, so I'll stop.
That's okay, but it's a very good answer. And so, I mean, I think the first thing which you're sharing is that at a basic level, the feeling of the students and the feeling of some of the Jewish students, and obviously these feelings go beyond the Jewish students, but as we look specific to anti-Semitism, is that the university is too quiet, that outrageous things are being said, and that the university has abandoned the bully pulpit of as part of which is part of its mission. Now the experience of students, obviously you should be in an environment where the issue is harassment. The issue is not free speech. The issue is harassment and potential violence directed towards certain students. And so what has been your and the experience of some of the folks you know in the Jewish community or in the pro-Israel community at MIT?
Sure. But I will say that I do think that it is also about free speech and not only harassment. So I want to give an example. So immediately after October 7th, I have actually right there, you can't see, I'm in my office right now, but I have giant windows that face Massachusetts Avenue. So it's like a very main thoroughfare. And I put up, again, MIT has like this very quirky, like prankster kind of culture. And I put up Israeli flags with, of course, the consent of my lab mates. And I put 2 posters up. One that said, "We stand with Israel," and one that said, "No excuse for terror." And 6 days after I put my flags and banners up, MIT instituted an anti-flag, an anti-postering, an anti-large banner rule 6 days after. And I can imagine that you can assume which flags and banners went down first and only, and they were mine. And mine and actually another friend of mine, her Israeli flag was also taken down. And I literally saw today like Black Lives Matter flags, Ukrainian flags. And I mean, and that's great. Like, I think these flags should be up. And like, you know, like LGBTQ flags should be up. That's, again, like expressing yourself as part of MIT's culture. Selectively silencing pro-Israel free speech should not be part of MIT's culture. And so certainly that is part of it. And like, that has been a very big shock. And just for how blatant it is, honestly, for a lot of us, is that they are trying to silence us, which is, yeah, it's just been crazy. And I guess in terms of your question about harassment, of course, I mean, unfortunately, there has been so much nonsense, so many horrible things said to Israelis, to Jews, to supporters of Israel who are neither Jewish nor Israeli. You know, people have sent us anonymous emails saying that they've heard that, you know, they live with people who are part of the anti-Israel club, and that they have heard them say that violence against any supporter of Israel is justified. And this student who anonymously emailed us warned us. They said, "You're like, I don't think you're safe, and I want you guys to be careful, because I've been hearing this stuff over and over in my dorm, and like, I am scared for you guys, and I want you guys to know that you should be like vigilant and protecting yourselves." And that is so scary to hear. I personally, like, as the president of the MIT Israel Alliance, unfortunately have heard so many horrible stories of, you know, students being bullied in their departmental lounges and told that actively excluded from, you know, academic events and like, you know, like social events within their department and their classes. And like, also very blatant discrimination against Israelis of, you know, people saying that they don't want to like be in study groups or like work on group projects with Israelis because they're, I mean, baby killers, whatever, all this horrible nonsense. But it's not only students too that have been harassed, it's also faculty members. So the MIT has this amazing program called Misty, which supports students going to a bunch of countries for internships over the summer and during January, which we normally have off. And there's a Misty Israel office. So I did Misty Brazil, I did Misty Israel, and it's an amazing program. And the faculty and staff at the Misty Israel office were harassed by a group of students and non-students, outsiders, who came to their offices and started banging on their doors and trying to unlock their offices and trying to get in and calling them, saying that they're committing genocide, like saying that they're like evil colonialists and like calling them, you know, baby killers, apartheid, whatever. And these people, these adults, were so scared of these students coming in that they said, like, oh my gosh, I don't know what they're going to do. They felt scared for their lives. They said, why are they trying to get into my office? Like, they had to barricade themselves inside of their offices. And these students were going door to door, banging and trying to unlock offices. So it's not just students being harassed, it's also faculty, it's also staff. And just 3 days ago, we had this amazing staff member, Mauricio Karchmer, who actually spoke at one of our first rallies after October 7th. He teaches Introduction to Algorithms, which over 60% of MIT undergrads take. It's a computer science, like it's like a intro level computer science class. And he left MIT because of anti-Semitism. He left because of the vile rhetoric he's seen coming out of his own students, and like just everything around him, and the fact that he feels so unsupported by his fellow faculty members and by the MIT administration. And he felt that he had to leave MIT, and that is horrible. And he's not the only one. I know several students, particularly Israelis, who have just left. They're back in Israel. They said, I'm taking a leave of absence for I don't know how long because I just can't be here anymore. They've just been bullied so much. One student was doxxed online and had, he was like, essentially like at one of these anti-Israel protests, he was, yelling back because he was getting riled up and angry. He was not violent. He didn't hurt anybody, but he was angry. And a video of him yelling at these protesters got online, and they put out they put a bounty to identify him, and somebody identified him for like $800 or something, and gave out his like total information, phone number, address, etc. And he began receiving death threats, and he didn't leave his dorm room for weeks. He was so afraid. MIT administration did nothing to help him. And finally, he just went back to Israel. And it's just unacceptable that students did that. Other students reported him, like gave out his information. It was a student who posted this photo of him. And it's just, first of all, so against the culture of MIT by like doing this to a fellow student, but also just totally unacceptable for the MIT administration to not have done anything. And yeah, but there have been hundreds of cases. I've heard so many horrible things. Like it's literally too much for me to say on this Zoom.
So this led you to Washington.
Yes.
And what was so it's clear why you would go to Washington. The experience of going to Washington, and sense of MIT, any sense of MIT vis-a-vis other schools?
Yeah. So obviously going to Washington was incredibly stressful. I actually was supposed to be going to Brazil for a science conference, and I ended up going, but I went late, and it was very, very complicated, but obviously I knew I had to go, and I had to be there and represent the students at MIT and the faculty and staff at MIT. And I really hoped that MIT would stand out, and that I didn't want President Kornbluth to totally fail at the hearing. I wanted her to be awesome and actually say things that would make us feel safer, and say that she had these grand plans for, establishing a task force on anti-Semitism that was staffed by students and faculty or something like this. I mean, none of that has ever happened. And I was so disappointed to see that she, you know, as a representative of MIT, that MIT behaved just like these other, you know, Ivy League blah institutions. You know, that's like we at MIT, like we're like the quirky, like weirdo nerds, and like we see these like Ivy people as like so like I don't know, like boring, and like I don't know, like stick up their tuchus kind of thing, and like we're like
I
the
should
cool
stop you here. There are
quirky
some
kids.
Ivy Leaguers on this call. So.
Sorry, no, my brother went to Harvard. It's fine, but
Okay.
but I mean, but obviously MIT's better. But you know what I mean? Like, it's like I really expected us to stand out and show, like, no, we are MIT. Like, we know better. We are understanding. We're open-minded. We're inquisitive, and we like have difficult discussions. And we know, obviously, this is a difficult discussion. This is a lot of difficult discussions. But like, that's what the job of an academic institution is. Like, the job of higher education is to prepare people for difficult discussions and difficult, you know, situations in the workplace, difficult, you know, MIT is supposed to create the future's, like the world's tech leaders and the world's scientific leaders. And part of that is equipping people with how to deal with problems and interpersonal things and socio-political things. And the fact that that didn't happen and that I didn't see like that spark that I really thought was inherent to MIT was incredibly disappointing. Yeah, I was very, very disappointed.
And so now the education department, US is added MIT, as you know, to the list of schools being investigated. And I know this is just happening. Any sense of what your hopes are there?
Sure. So, the reason that I think, I mean, it wasn't personally me who submitted something to the Department of Education, but I know that there are students and faculty and staff who have, because the problem is that we've been having all these cases of anti-Semitism. We've been reporting them to MIT, and literally nothing has happened. And literally, one student tried to report a case of anti-Semitism to this group called IDHR, so the Institute's Discrimination and Harassment Resources Office. And when they submitted their claim to, or their complaint to IDHR, they were told that Jews are not a protected class, and so they can't. IDHR can't help with this issue with harassment related to anti-Semitism. And the student came to me and to some faculty and said, "What am I supposed to do when the Institute Office of Discrimination and Harassment is discriminating against me because I'm Jewish and saying that I can't file this harassment complaint?" So it was like totally crazy. And so finally they decided that they would submit their claim, or excuse me, their complaint to the only office that we have to complain about discrimination. So they filed a complaint against IDHR to IDHR. And so there's just like this kind of like, you know, chasing of the tail thing where reporting things to MIT is so futile. And I think people were just getting fed up. And so they, you know, went to the higher level. They reported it to, you know, the Department of Education, because they know that it's useless to try and report something here.
Wow. Wow. Now, are there any bright spots?
I mean, for sure.
It sounds that this has been the most complex fall that
Tell me about it.
that you have.
I have not practiced piano enough for my lessons with Jason.
We'll never know. Don't worry.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's been incredibly complex, and certainly, like, as the president of the MIT Israel Alliance, I've been so busy and so focused on this, and just been like, it's taken over my life. But like, it has also taken everybody's lives over. Every Jewish, Israeli, all of these students, but also the students who care. It has really impacted everybody. And again, like, the disruptions caused by the anti-Israel protesters do affect all students, staff, and faculty. And just the uneasiness of, being in a study group, or a lab group or whatever, with, people who are saying horrible things, is just, it's just been hard for a lot of people. We get so many emails and complaints and reports sent to the MIT Israel Alliance, but we've gotten a surprising number from non-Jewish students who have said, like, I witnessed, the interfaith chaplain totally intimidating and harassing Jewish students. And as, a non-Jewish student, I even felt uncomfortable for the Jewish students in the room. And we've had so many of these messages, which, on the one hand is horrible, but on the other hand, it's so nice to know that there are people who have no skin in the game, but care and acknowledge what's happening. And
that we're not devoid of allies.
Absolutely. And like, I'm lucky enough to have, there's one other Jewish student in my lab, but everybody else in my lab, including my professor, are not Jewish. And I have had nothing but support from them. My professor has been so supportive of me. And I was like, I'm so sorry, I haven't done research in 3 months. I've just been totally wrapped up. And my professor, was totally understanding of, what I'm going through, and supportive of my work to support the Jewish community at MIT. And I think that has definitely been a bright spot. And also just to see the global Jewish community coming together, and the global community of Jewish allies. So like, yeah, I think that has been pretty amazing. And of course, like, I've been connected with people around the world at this point now, people who I never would have met otherwise through this. And so I think that there's a lot of positive that we can, a strengthening of the Jewish community. I also have one friend who actually I didn't really know super well before this, an LGBTQ, a trans girl, who is also a graduate student. And, they didn't really identify much with, being pro-Israel or Jewish. And after October 7th, they started coming to Shabbat dinners and felt really, much closer to their Jewish identity. And even though before had felt, even anti-Israel sentiment, had felt ostracized, maybe even from traditional Orthodox Judaism because of their queerness, now felt a closeness to the Jewish people just as a people, and understanding that, the part about Judaism that obviously a lot of people don't understand is that it's not like just the religion part, like, Catholicism is. It's not just following these rules. It's, it's like who we are as an ethnicity, as a people, as a tribe. And I think the kind of like tribal nature has come out for a lot of people, which I think is really beautiful and nice, and like really connected people in such an awesome way.
Yeah, you've said that very well. One of the challenges which the Jewish people have is that we try to get pigeonholed into saying we're a religion or saying we're an ethnicity, when in fact we've existed before those new types of ways which they seek to organize us. So the definitions don't fit well because we were there before these new boxes of definitions. And the Jewish people existing in this way. So we have a number of students are on our call tonight. Some parents of students who are heading off shortly to university. Some parents who have kids, and there's, I guess, grandparents who worry about their grandkids who are at school or about to go to school. As you know, a big issue now is where to send your child. What will be the right place? Where will they be respected? Where will they feel safe? Where will anything which you would say to those the young people of how they should be looking at this, or their parents or grandparents?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a hard question, and I think if people are, worried, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily what I'm about to say is the right fit for everybody. I think, if people feel that they need, I will say my answer and then I will qualify it. So I think as broadly, I think that we need to carve out a space for Jews everywhere. And that even if there is an institution that has experienced total, horrible, ugly, rampant anti-Semitism, that's not the place where we should be avoiding. That's the place where we should be sending all our kids. Because that's the place where you need to start, the point of higher education is to teach people to think and discuss and to have intellectual conversations. That's the whole point. And to think critically about these difficult issues. And I think that if people are so afraid of having difficult conversations, I don't think that's productive for anybody. I think people, I met somebody over, I actually stayed with my friend over winter break. I didn't end up going home. And it was in South Carolina. I'd never been to South Carolina before. And I met several people there who had never met a Jew. And for me, I thought that was funny. But I think that's useful to just kind of be open and talk to people who have never had the opportunity to talk to a Jew, who have maybe never had the opportunity to talk to a Zionist. And, maybe they won't leave the conversation agreeing with you, but at least you're humanizing these Jews, these Zionists. You can't be a nice person and say hey, let's grab a coffee and chat. And unless they're totally bad people, they won't be able to be calling you a Zionist pig to your face. Maybe they'll think twice. Maybe they'll think, oh, all of this garbage I've been inhaling from TikTok, maybe it's not all correct. So I think that there's an important element of not being afraid. And this is something that I think is a very post-Holocaust viewpoint, of kind of making our voices heard in these spaces where our voices are trying to be silenced. But I will qualify that, as I mentioned, that obviously that's not the right fit for all students. And there are certain students for whom that's too difficult, or for whom that's very, very uncomfortable and will make a bad experience for them. So of course, every student should go where they will feel the most comfortable and be most academically productive. So that's my answer.
And one last, I have other questions as well, but one last sort of these sort of questions, really directed back of some thoughts perhaps for us, which is you have synagogue leadership on this call of different synagogues, and communal leadership as well, and again some non-Jewish leaders. But what should our community be doing to help? Can our community be doing something to help? How should the synagogue or the federation or how can we be most supportive? Because clearly, as you've described it, what students have been experiencing on the universities is isolating and the like. So
Yeah. So I think that what we're experiencing now is unfortunately only going to get worse on campuses. I don't know if you guys all saw, but there's been a lot of recent polling about 18 to 25-year-olds, young people, the TikTok generation, the students that are going to be on these university campuses in the next year, that like over 50% of them sympathize with Hamas and believe that what happened on October 7th was justified. And just these absolutely crazy statistics about terrorist sympathies. And, I'm sure you guys heard in the news about, like, on TikTok, the Bin Laden letters were going around,
Yeah.
and there's like Bin Laden supporters amongst like high schoolers now, which is just like what, like, totally unimaginable, unfathomable. But that unfortunately is the reality that we are living in. We're living in a world where people have been completely brainwashed by things like TikTok, and are just kind of like taking in this crazy, biased, hateful news and not given the opportunity or the chance to kind of grapple with these things, or being given alternative perspectives or opportunities to discuss with people that don't share these perspectives. And so for that reason, I am afraid that it'll be a lot worse in the next 10 years. And to answer your question, I think the most important thing that synagogues and all of these Jewish organizations can be doing is education. Not only education for Jewish young people, but also as many non-Jewish young people as you can, and kind of explaining that this is the thing that we all learned on October 7th, is that whether you like it or not, if you're Jewish, you have been put in the front lines of this media war. In Israel, if you were called to the front lines of the actual war, the physical war, and everywhere else, Jews have been called to the front lines of this media, this social war. And that's what's going to happen even more strongly for the next generation of students on campus. And they have to be prepared for that. They have to be prepared to deal with people who are calling them names, who are spouting totally false propaganda about Jews, about Israel, about the Holocaust. There's like an insane number of Holocaust deniers among Gen Z. And so I believe, very in the most Jewish way possible, education, education, education. We need to educate the young people. We need to educate people. We need to teach people how to have these difficult conversations. We need to teach people what to do when the people around them are like spouting propaganda and making them feel so scared. We need to tell people how to stand up for themselves and how to not just feel scared and let these people continue to say this nonsense in public. I think that's absolutely would be the most amazing thing possible, is if the next generation of Jewish college students and their allies are proud and educated and well informed and confident and able to compassionately communicate with people who disagree with them.
Thank you. You are such an impassioned and articulate Israel advocate. Talia, what brought you into the pro-Israel community? What sort of is your story? How did you get here?
That's a good question. I mean, I went to Jewish day school in Arizona, so I grew up with Israeli teachers, and I remember I was in middle school when Gilad Shalit was taken, and so I remember all about that. And I guess I just like always grew up with an understanding. I mean, I think when I was that young, I didn't understand how important Israel was, but with an understanding that Israel was very important, and it was deeply connected to the identity of the Jewish people. And I think as I grew up and I studied more about our history, about the Holocaust, I did actually a Poland trip through Chabad last year, which was really impactful for me and really made me understand why, especially after the Holocaust, Israel was so needed. Because we were literally kicked out of everywhere, which is another reason why I just think it's crazy when people are like, go back to where you came from. It's like, what? They kicked us out of everywhere. So whatever. So I guess all of that, and after October 7th, it was not even like, I think no brainer maybe puts it a little too lightly, but like it was not a question for me, like whether or not I was standing with Israel and I was supporting Israel. And even maybe some of you guys know, but my mother is Jewish, my father is Muslim, my half sister's mother or family is Hindu, my half brother's family is like American Christian. I come from a very diverse background. And I went to after Jewish day school, I went to Catholic high school. So very, diverse group of people who surround me, but like luckily the people in my family all kind of understood that after October 7th, it was not a question, do we support Israel's right to defend itself from these totally brutal, evil terrorists? Like what these people did were wrong. And like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. And which, I mean, I could go much further into this thing about the fact that people are kind of talking about like Jews versus Muslims, Islamophobia versus anti-Semitism. I think it's so horrible to include Jews and Muslims in this kind of conversation because these guys are not Muslims. These are extremist, crazy terrorist guys. Like they do not represent the vast majority of Muslims. And I just think putting them in anywhere close to the same box is so disgusting and is so like disrespectful to Muslims. But I mean, that's a total other conversation. But anyways, yes, I to answer your question, there was not really any doubt in my mind about supporting Israel and about supporting, also like a lot of this has just been about supporting people on campus who are being harassed and bullied and discriminated against, and supporting my fellow students. And that also was just something that I knew I needed to do.
Now, I've had the luxury of being able to be the first one to pose questions to you, but there are others, and so for those on the call, we invite you to put them in the chat. If you can direct them to Daniel Goodman, that would be ideal. But if you type your questions into the chat, we'll try to see how many we can get to. First one is concerning what are there Jewish students at MIT who do not support Israel or Israeli policies vis-a-vis Hamas? And let's keep it on that. If we start talking about the Netanyahu government, we could be in a very different place. But the anti-Zion, there must be anti-Zionist Jews as well at MIT. What has that been like?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, not that it needs to be said, but I will reiterate it, is that criticizing the government of Israel has nothing to do with, whether or not you're a Zionist. Like so many Israelis were spending all summer in the streets protesting their government. So obviously, that doesn't make them hate Israel or whatever. They love their country. That's why they're doing it. But yes, there are anti-Zionists at MIT. There are, anti-Israel Jewish people at MIT. I wouldn't say that it's a huge number, maybe like a dozen, if that. And I personally haven't spoken to them directly, although there is an Israeli who I know quite well, who's been very active also in advocating for students, who has spoken to them. And I think that what he said is that they agree on 90% of everything. It's that these people don't think that Jews have no right to live in Israel. They just disagree on Israel's defending itself, and disagree about the necessities of Israel's, defense. And I think that having these types of conversations is important. I personally, again, like, I'm sure there's 10 to 15% that I disagree with them about. And it's hard because we have seen some gaslighting by them, of them saying, oh, we're Jewish and we feel okay, so all these people are just like being melodramatic or something, which has been a little bit disappointing, because like I would never say that about somebody else. Like if somebody says that they don't feel safe or that they have been harassed, like I'm not gonna say like, no, you didn't. So that was like a little bit not awesome. But again, like, as I've been saying, like, this is like the point when we need to just have conversations, and they're going to be hard conversations, but like, they're members of the MIT community too, and their perspectives should be heard. They should not be silenced, of course. And that's part of life now, is we need to be able to interact with, discuss with, and work with people who disagree about these things with us, and figure out if we can find a place where we can say, okay, we disagree about 10 to 15% of what you're saying, but look how much we agree on. And is that okay? And like, can we, be in a lab group together? And that's okay. And I think that that's important.
There are a number of questions coming in, so I'm gonna and I may want to sort of group one or two together. First, who are the people who are doing the intimidating? Are these political ideologues? Are these Middle Eastern or Palestinian students? Who is the group doing this? And secondly, and this is another question which I think can be grouped with it, which is, what, if anything, has been the role of the Boston Police Department on these incidents?
So I guess in terms of the intimidation portion, a lot of it has come from like staff, faculty, senior administration kind of thing. And like, it's more like bullying, harassment from students, and like more like higher ups with the intimidation thing, like where they kind of, like, for example, with my flags, they kind of came after me for a week by sending different people to come, like, say like, oh, you have to take down your flags or else we don't know what'll happen. Oh, like they sent like three men from facilities to my office on Friday night on Shabbat. And they were like, oh, like, if you don't take down your flags, we don't know what'll happen tomorrow. Like, this kind of stuff. So there's that. And then also, I think I mentioned the case of the interfaith chaplain who was in charge, one of the people in charge of an event at MIT. I think it was about Native Americans. And during the event, they interrupted it 4 times to talk about how Israel is an evil, genocidal, white supremacist apartheid state, and then made all of the Jewish students in the audience raise their hand so that they could get a kosher meal, and then went one by one to each of these Jewish students and sized them up according to, so we got an email, actually, the reason I know about this is because we got an email from a Native American student who said that they felt so uncomfortable by this interfaith chaplain's treatment of Jewish students, and in this, like, that it seemed like she was sizing them up about what she had just said about Israel. And this kind of intimidation you know, it is kind of has come from more of these like sources of kind of power. And yeah, so and it's been witnessed, like as I said, like not just by Jewish students, by also non-Jewish students who have been made to feel incredibly uncomfortable by this. And the Boston police, so we actually have campus police, and the MIT police have been very, very supportive and helpful, and responsive to us, in as much as they can be. So yeah, they've been great.
And so now, based on what you've said, one of the questions which came in was sort of the role of Hillel at MIT for advocating for students, and also, and I think you've addressed this, but has the president of MIT recommended any specific measures to be taken to deal with anti-Semitism on campus?
No.
That's
So
what I
this is
thought the answer
yeah,
was.
no. They
So,
created
and a
a task
related
force called
question.
Standing Together Against Hate, which they haven't staffed with anybody except for the MIT chancellor. Yeah, just all lip service only.
The alumni, are they playing a role?
Mm-hmm. So there has been an alumni network that has been very active and supportive, and they have issued their own like press releases and letters, statements to administration. I think it's called the like MIT JAA, like Jewish Alumni Association or Jewish Alumni Alliance or something like that. But yeah, they've been very supportive. A lot of alumni have reached out. So yeah.
The relationship between the Black community at MIT and the Jewish community, as you know, historically, we've had a very close relationship, fighting for equality, civil rights, and the like. Do you see a rift there? And if there is a rift, what do you think that is it overblown? Is it permanent? How would you describe
Well, I
Black Jewish
certainly hope
relations
it's not
at MIT?
permanent. I mean, certainly, like, you know, you can't describe all of the Black people at MIT as the one group, but the Black Student Association did sign on to the Coalition for Palestine, which is the coalition, essentially they're the coalition against Israel. And so they have like signed these statements like we saw at many universities, essentially like Israel is responsible for October 7th. They made their bed, let them lie in it. Like these horrible statements that like Harvard also had a similar one that said that like it's Israel's fault for October 7th. And so that has been kind of, I mean, unfortunate. Again, as you mentioned, historically there have been like there's been a very strong connection with the Black and Jewish communities. So I certainly hope it's not permanent. I hope there can be more discussions. That's something that we're trying to do as an organization, is have more educational talks and like events like co-hosted by clubs to just kind of get more talking and education and conversation happening.
All right, thank you. I'm going to bring in Rabbi Cohen, and let me just ask, I think we have covered the questions which have been forwarded to me from the chat. Dan, if there are others which I haven't, you can forward them. But let me also say, Hillel, yes, the role that Hillel is playing at MIT.
So we have both a Hillel and a Chabad, and they have been supportive of us, especially in the beginning when we were trying to do rallies and had no money. They were financially supportive. Also, like, we weren't a real organization at first, so they were like booking rooms for us and those sorts of things. So yeah, they have been supportive, and at least for me, I'm actually the graduate student president of Chabad also. I have been for the past 2 years. And so I've certainly found a lot of refuge in going to Chabad for Shabbat dinners and like that whole like homey community. So yeah, definitely amazing that like to have both of these organizations on campus.
Well, great. Rabbi Cohen.
Thank you. It's an honor, really, to co-sponsor tonight and to be a part of this with you, Rabbi Polikoff and Congregation B'nai Israel, and of course, the Federation of Western Connecticut and the Israel Group from B'nai Israel. But Talia, I have to say, evidently you're a fan of Jason and Julie and this club that exists. I'm a fan of Uncle Eric. So that's how I want to. But I think I'm just going to say, I think everybody on the call tonight and those who will watch on YouTube, we're a fan of yours. I mean, really, Talia, it is really inspiring. It's overwhelming to hear you talk firsthand about real life situations of what's going on in MIT. We know it's happening elsewhere as well, but it's inspiring to know that your strength exists and that you're doing something with it, that you are both you're knowledgeable about the situation writ large, that what's happening in Israel and certainly what's happening here in the States. On campuses, you're active in your advocacy and working with fellow Jews and finding allies and leadership, whether or not they're necessarily responding appropriately or properly, you are acknowledging it and trying to work with them. And you're aware also for the strength that we find just in building community on our own, with ourselves, going to Shabbos dinner, whatever that is, and working with that, I think is really lovely. And there are so many lines that call it from this week's Torah portion. This is a big one. Parashat Shmot is where, we're going to have the story of the Israelites and slavery and Moses at the burning bush. I want to grab just 2 points of it. One is that Moses sees this bush that is on fire, but it's not being consumed. And dare I say that as a certain metaphor for us as the Jewish people, that there are times that we are literally on fire, but we're not consumed by it because we stay strong and we have all the strength inside of us. And Moses, he's asked to do this job to lead, and he's remarkably reluctant, but he goes to it. So you, Talia, give us that inspiration to know the importance of each individual to stand and to go, even when we might not necessarily feel like it, but you knew, sure, you got yourself to Brazil for the conference, but you needed to go testify. You needed to bring that voice forward. And that's not all of us are going to go testify before Congress. But there are so many things that we can do and should be doing in our communities locally, whether it's in Connecticut or abroad, helping in Israel, helping our students at college campuses, wherever that is. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing, if I can say. Yisher koach should go on in good strength. And really, it's an honor that we get to participate, to learn from you on this night.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening and caring about what's happening. I'm sure so many people are kind of removed from universities and may not necessarily have direct connection with current students. So it's nice to see that people care.
With all of the service which we discussed this evening, and as Rabbi Cohen indicated, we leave tonight with better educated, understanding more, but also with an extraordinary amount of hope and confidence as we face things for the future. We try to be relatively on time, so we thank everybody for attending. We thank Temple Shalom of New Milford and the Jewish Federation. Talia, of course, great thanks to you. And we look forward to seeing everybody soon to sort of pick up last word from what we've heard from Talia and Rabbi Cohen. Jewish pride and Jewish allyship are extraordinarily important, and all that we can do as individuals and as a community to promote that, we should be doing. Thanks so much, and Lila Tov. Good night, everybody.